Okay, so this is going to be about Springs Chapter 4, the ideology and politics of the common school. So up to now, there's been a focus on political aspects, really, or the political goals of schooling in the New Republic, post-revolution in the United States. And now we're moving up into more the 1830s, and school has taken on a sort of a life of its own, and there's definitely a movement now to sort of shift from private to public schools within the United States. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what the motivation and the basis for this is, the ideology of the common school, who came up with it, some different interpretations of what the whole common school movement was all about. This cloze activity, or essentially a fill in the blank, is just a little activity to quiz yourself. If we're in a face-to-face class, I would have you stop and you'd answer these and we'd talk about it, that kind of a thing. So you can stop the lecture here and go over it yourself. And these are just some real basic, important concepts that come from Springs Chapter 4. You can open the PowerPoint that I attached in ELC as well, and the answers are in the notes section of that PowerPoint. So you can go ahead and open that to get the answers. So the common school ideology. So what can education do? It can be used to ensure the dominance of Protestant Anglo-American culture, reduce tensions between social classes, eliminate crime and poverty, and stabilize the political system, and form patriotic citizens. So the common school, or schooling in general, public schooling, is taking on a much sort of different role. It's taking on added responsibilities for the common good, or for the society in general. Up until this point, remember, it was just about teaching the kids, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and making sure that they can be active, participating citizens in the electorate. If you're going to have a democratic republic, you need to have intelligent people voting. So the common school is shifting more and starting to take on, again, more responsibilities for the schools in order to serve society. So some of the distinctive features of the common school: obviously educating children in a common schoolhouse. When you say a common schoolhouse, this doesn't necessarily just mean one room, but it means one schoolhouse. And when they say common, it's meaning more the different SES, different social economic status, different classes of people. So you've got rich and poor in the same schoolhouse, getting to know each other so that in the end it will reduce social class conflict. So even when these people grow up, they will then learn to somehow relate to each other better, because either they actually did know each other when they were in school, the manager or the supervisor at the factory and the worker, or they knew somebody like that, so they have more empathy and more understanding of different classes. And then, of course, this idea that you can use the schools to improve society by ending social problems, like, of course, promoting public morality, ending crime and poverty, and providing equal opportunity. Creation of state agencies. So now that you have this expanded idea about what schools need to be doing, obviously you're going to need an oversight organization of some kind. So different state agencies start to take over at this time and become, it leads to the more of the bureaucracy that we understand today that revolve around schools at the local level, but definitely at the state level to control local schools. So here's Horace Mann. Here's a picture of him right over here. And this is a very famous quote from him: "Education, then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the conditions of men, the balance wheel of the social machinery." And this kind of sums up his ideology and what he believes. He believes that this will be the great equalizer. That's a very common quote from him, of people. And this will help people from all classes have an equal opportunity to be successful in life. So he began his career as a politician. He was a lawyer and served in the Massachusetts state legislature. And he believed children would also receive a common moral education based on the general principles of the Bible and common virtues. Remember, during this time, if you're talking about diversity in education, you're talking about, certainly there are some different ethnicities going to the common schools. But I think what you're really talking about in diversity here is different religious diversity, more so. Now, yes, there was some Jewish population at the time, but and others at the time, but not as much. It was mostly different Christian denominations. So he believed that having just these principles from the Bible and focusing on the common virtues that all denominations of Christianity shared would be, something that would benefit children. Political instruction was to include only the articles in the Creed of Republicanism. So they weren't trying to push any kind of denomination or any kind of, not denomination, any political party, but just basically all the things that tie us together as Americans. So we're all living in a democratic republic, so let's just, push the values that are accepted by all in that type of a, country, in our America at the time. So class conflict. So he obviously had a different take on it than Marx and Engels. So he believed that not the revolution by the working class, but education, okay, a common school education would be the end to social class conflict, okay. He believed that expanding class consciousness would help create understanding and thus reduce conflict. So I talked about that a little already. Conflict would also be reduced by increasing the general wealth of society. Again, if everybody has an equal opportunity in society and they're educated well, they will be able to perform whatever aspect, whatever duty in society that they can perform. They'll get paid for it and they'll be happier. And this will, of course, increase the general wealth of society, and everybody will, and again, the next one, the unequal distribution of property will end because people will have more money, they'll be able to buy more things, and this is supposed to lead to, essentially a bigger middle class, a much more common social class where everybody can have, pieces of the benefits of society. Now, if you haven't already noticed, which you probably have, there are some inherent problems with this idea about common schooling or, public schools in general. And this becomes much more evident as you move on through time and you start to put more and more people, more immigrants come into the picture after slavery and so forth. But during this time, which is before slavery had ended and before there was a huge onslaught of immigrants, whose political or moral values should be taught, right? So common schools never became common due to, infighting within the Christian religion. You've got Catholics and Protestants, and so you have these Catholic schools, these parochial schools that break away from the common school because of certain, that we'll talk about later, certain real, differences in how they approach education. No, not just how they approach education, but some of the Bibles and the Protestant Bibles at the time the lessons within some of the primers, some of the books, tended to really denigrate Catholics and the Pope and these concepts. So obviously Catholics didn't want to send their kids to these common schools for those types of reasons. No proof that education reduces crime. Really, are you just creating a smarter criminal? That was kind of the thought is, well, if you just give everybody an education that well, first of all, kids will be in school. They won't be out committing petty crimes or theft or whatever. But, there's no proof that this actually works. You just get, oftentimes, a much smarter criminal. There's also no proof that common school does or can eliminate political, economic, or social unrest. And I think we know that today. These problems are rooted in economic and political structures in society. And then this last one is actually really important. If you have a common school and you promote this idea of equal opportunity, then if you fail, it's your fault. So now if there's problems and you fail, it's your fault. So you have to sort of internalize that as an individual, not, hey, there's some real clear existing inequities in the structure of society. So maybe it's, not entirely the individual's fault if the rich kid over here easily makes it through school, but the poor kid over on the other side who doesn't have the same resources or opportunities really, doesn't make it. So obviously there are some problems to this ideology and this way of thinking about common schools. The working men's parties, he talks about this in the chapter as well, and they pretty much agree with Horace Mann and his ideas, but they believe that education should be more about gaining political and economic power, as well as protecting themselves, protecting the working man from getting taken advantage of, okay, from exploitation by the wealthy. Now, the Whigs versus the Democrats during this time, it's just important to understand how each party sort of felt about education. And they sort of have this battle between their approaches to education. Now, they both agree that education is a necessity. Obviously, it's believed that it will maintain liberty in this, again, democratic republic. And also remember, I gave you a definition of liberalism and classical liberalism. We're not talking liberal as in today's version of, oh, he's a liberal or she's a conservative or those types of things. Liberalism in this sense is tied to the root word liberty, okay? And it really was about, turning away from the absolute monarchy, this idea of hereditary privilege, state religion, and this divine right of kings ideas, okay? So now we are a democratic republic, and it is supported by the ideas of liberalism, okay? But now the Whigs, and they formed because they wanted to modernize, they wanted to industrialize, and they didn't like Jackson's Democrat Party at all and the way he was handling things. So the Whigs sort of came out of this, and they wanted central government to control the public schools. They wanted more government control over the free market. Well, they believed the government control would ensure the workings of the free market. So they needed regulation in order to make it work properly. Okay? And that's in stark contrast to what the Democrats at the time believed, and they wanted minimal government intervention. Okay? They wanted more localized control. The economy should function without the government regulation. Government attempts to order society, they saw as attempting to promote and protect the privileges of the upper class. So in many ways, you can see that the Democratic platform at this time really was more in line with a lot of what the Republican platform today is. And that is sort of this, hands off the economy, let the free market work itself out, less government and less government intervention. So it's kind of interesting the way that they kind of have changed roles today. And then just at the end, he talks a little bit, Spring does, about different interpretations of the Common School movement. And that's kind of, it's a good lesson. Again, there's a bunch of facts that a historian has before them, a bunch of documents. And there's no set story that's told by these primary documents. You remember from chapter 1 or one of the first PowerPoints that I gave you. So how do they take all this chaos and turn it into a story and turn it into something that makes sense? Well, Cubberley and Curdy, Merle Curdy, these are, early historians of educational historians, and they have different ideas about what this Common School movement was. So the Common School movement to them was more this, it's a noble story of the working class taking education back from the rich. And then Katz has a more critical sort of idea about it. The Common School was sort of orchestrated by the elite, and it was to maintain social control of, immigrants and workers and make them effective laborers. All right. Again, Welter has his ideas about it, and you can read that. And Carl Kasell has his ideas about, what the Common School movement was. But it's important for you to understand, though, that depending on who you read, obviously there's going to be different interpretations of what this movement was. So, just again, always, and again, Spring is obviously himself. These are his perceptions of the data and of the facts and so forth. So, there is this difference between the facts of the matter, and yes, the Common School was established. Yes, this is what they intended to do. But the interpretations of how it actually played out and the politics surrounding it obviously are up for your own interpretation. So that's just sort of a brief talk about Chapter 4 of Spring, the Common School Movement, and, some of the important aspects of what you were supposed to know in that chapter.